Going on, everyone? My name is Nick. I am the creator and lead designer of a currently unreleased sci-fi meets fantasy TTRPG called Antique Worlds. This is a GM's retrospective where I break down my very first campaign I ever GM'd and just really point out how big of an idiot and how bad I did and what I could learn from it. So, last week we had the lore and the character introductions. Now we finally have session one. Let's begin, shall we? So, the session that starts everything off starts in a prison cell. Now, I told you before, the campaign takes place in a continent named Hansha, and half of the continent is made up of the Mayan Empire, and then the other half is made up of the Pike Rebellion. Because of the fracture event, there is this massive stretch of desert that scar in the planet that cuts across the entire continent, and it basically acts as a like demilitarized DMZ, demilitarized zone, where there's a bunch of border towns. It's kind of a safe place for people to pass through in their travels and everything like that. So we start at one of those border towns. Its name is Barsana. Not that it's important, but we start there. Each of the players, all seven of them, are in a prison cell. So it gives them a chance to see each other, kind of introduce each other. They don't know why they're in a prison cell. They're trying to figure it out. Uh, the sheriff comes in, he brings them all to his office to discuss with them, and basically he tells them, hey, look, you're all staying in the same inn. You're the only resident staying there. Money went missing, and in y'all's shared common area, the money was found. Can't prove it was anyone specific, so I could either lock you all up, or if you just help me out with a small job, I will drop all charges and let you go free. The players, they argue about it, yada yada yada. They eventually accept his offer where they'll do complete this one job for him and then he's gonna let them go and they won't have to worry about it. So let's pause right there and it's gonna go into my first point. Thinking back on that, it all feels like that initial start just feels very contrived because it was one of those things where it's like I put them in the jail cell, they didn't get a say. I kind like it was basically forced on them to do this job where it's like they could have said no, but then they would go to jail. That yeah, there is nothing wrong with just starting in a tavern. I know some people think it's cliche, but hey, if it works, it works. I didn't want to, but I still needed a way to get them all to work together. That's what I came up with. Looking back on it, I don't I don't like it. I'm not in love with it. I would probably do something different. I didn't hear any complaints from the players that, it wasn't an issue. It's just one of those things. I wasn't a fan of it now that I kind of think about it. And it's to the point where in any campaign now, I just have the players make sure they know each other before the campaign starts. They're all connected somehow. I think it's a lot cleaner of a way to start campaign if everyone just knows each other. That way, introductions don't need to be made. You don't have to figure out some random reason to get everyone to work together. It's just, hey, we know each other. We're already working together. Let's go. That's my personal opinion. It's a lot cleaner, a lot easier. That's something I learned from this very contrived way getting the players to play together. So basically, this is a obviously this like I said, this is a on a in a desert. Water is like the is gold. They have certain people in this little town whose job it is to go well water. So the water is behind. It's like 3 days late. The wellers haven't shown up. They haven't made any contacts. They all are dead. So the sheriff asks, "Hey, go bring the delivery of water to the city, and all's forgiven. You don't have to worry about it." So water is like gold. It hasn't rained since the fracture event happened. It is bone dry. It is Mos Eisley levels of dry out there. So they agree. They head out, and Tara, is the nature girl. She does a couple rolls, and she finds a way to save a bunch of time on this like hidden path that no one really knew about. So they cut through this path, and then eventually they come up on this opening in this cavernous area because it's all rock. They find what was clearly this battle had taken place. there was only one body was left behind. All the other like there's pools of blood where people had died, and the sand was very clearly, disrupted and showed that a violent scuffle had taken place, but no other bodies remained. Even where the pools of blood were, there was no bodies left behind other than this one. And this person, this man, he was wearing armor that signified he was a high-ranking soldier in the Miatan Empire. So much so that Sloane actually recognized him. And so she ran up to his body, and he was dying. He was basically, torn open, and his body, his skin, there was this like black thickness across his skin and in his veins, and it was spreading throughout his body as well. She talks to him, but he's basically dying. He doesn't have much to say. He has a bloody envelope in his hand. Um, and I don't remember here's another little GM point. I don't remember it was a real life letter I had. It was I had made. It had the name Rune, Rune, which is the name of Sloane's father. In game, they did not know that. The other characters do it, but Sloane clearly did. And in my notes when I was reviewing everything, somehow Parallax got the note. Then he gave it to Warden, and then Sloane pleaded with Warden to give her the note, and because Warden is, the mom in the group, he gave her the note. I don't remember how Parallax was the initial one to get the note when it was clearly uh, the point of it was to get it to Sloane. It worked out in the end, but it was just another thing where it's something I've tried to do better of, like going forward, is like if I have something that's for a character that's plot relevant, extremely important for a character, like making sure they get it. And then other times, like if it's not as serious of a moment, letting the wrong player get it. That way, there can be some great role play. Both options come with positives and negatives. It worked out in the end. Sloane is the one who got it. She needed it, but it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, it wasn't. But and then the other thing is the one thing about this dying soldier whose name was Anji. The sword he carried was actually a broken sword. That's what he was known for. So Sloane and Tama and the rest of them buried this man, and then they took his sword to give back to his home. That was there to set up a lot of stuff. That letter becomes very important, and then that black sickness also becomes very important later on. Now, eventually find the area where the water is welled. There's some computers. They like it's all electronic. I kind of based it off of the moisture farmers from Tatooine. But they read the calculate like they read the computer, and they see the water had been welled in the last couple of days. And then they found tracks of a wagon that was used to carry the welled water out of there, and they end up following the tracks, and they eventually, after a bunch of travel, they find a wagon full of welled water. And searching the area, they see some like bloody drag marks where they're pretty sure the whalers were killed and dragged into a nearby cave or cavern. So they decide to go into the cavern and search around. They actually find a little girl in there hiding. Her name was River. They find her and they kind of take her with them because they don't want to leave a 6-year-old girl in a cave. But as they're exploring the cavern, they find an very old painted symbol, which the symbol is what the Pikes use to show that an area might have secret information or weapons cache or food, something like that. Sloane plays it off as like she doesn't want to tell them she's working with the Pikes, so she plays it off very well of like, let's look around, this could mean something. And then they find an old note, and it basically on it was it said, she humbly requests your audience in Awa. A contact is waiting for you in Lancaster. So Awa is the capital city of the Pike territory, and then Lancaster is a small border town not far from Lusana where they started. Now this was a mistake on my part. So I don't know why I put that letter there because in my mind I was using it to kind of build the lore of the area, and I wanted to show that there were Pike spies working around there. What I did not communicate with my group is that this was all old. This was not recent. So for quite a few sessions, it became a question of who was being waited on in Lancaster. Like, who was this note for? You know, Sloane's character was, was this note for me? Like, and then it kept coming up in various sessions, like, who is this person that was supposed to be at Lancaster? And like, who was it written for? Yada, yada, yada. And that was my fault. I completely failed as a GM to relay that that information was old. This was an old piece of paper. This was old paint. This area you could clearly see had not been walked in quite a while. So it was one of those things where in my mind, I imagined it as something simple. Hey, here's a little bit of world building lore, just so you know. And because I didn't do a good job at it, it kind of took on its own thing where they viewed it as a mystery that needed to be solved when there was no mystery there. I didn't come out. Actually, this is the first time I've admitted that to the players about that little note. Because I was holding on to it because I was hoping that I could use it later on to tie into something, and it never came up. So I was trying to keep it a secret still, so I could use it later. I never got a chance to use it, but that's the truth. So if any of my players are listening, there you go. I suck. All right, so as they're leaving the cavern, or I think actually, hold on, they go a little bit deeper into the cavern and they are attacked by this like feral naked man. And he's also covered in that black sickness that the soldier, Anji, they found, they were both covered in that same sickness. And this man was crazy. They eventually defeat him and kill him, and they are like, "Nah, we need to leave this place. It's scary. There's creepy old naked men that are just attack us." So they leave the caverns and then get back to the wagon with all the water, and then they continue on and they're heading back towards Barsana to, finish their end of the deal with the sheriff. But night falls before they can do that, and they set up camp. Um, and they're all kind of like, sitting around the campfire. Things are real quiet. Everyone's kind of just about getting ready for bed. And then they notice like a discrepancy in the air. Like it's this weird shimmer, almost like a heat shimmer, but it was far more unnatural than a heat shimmer. And they see six eyes, like three on top of each other with a very like sharp angle down, and then that leads to like this massive mouth, like almost think like the Cheshire Cat when he appears, and but it's like a mouth filled with these razor sharp fangs, and that's all they see. They just see the eyes and the mouth. There's no head or body attached to it. And then they also notice that they cannot move. They can barely breathe. And this is the first introduction to Keolia. And just for some behind the scenes stuff, Teolia's he had his own theme song that played every time he appeared, and it was the instrumental version of Bloodlust by the Wise Man's Fears. But so he appears to them, and he immediately starts mocking Tama. Now, Tama in real life is played by my younger brother. And it was one of my favorite moments because Tama, my younger brother, literally was at a loss for words. And it's funny because Tama is this incredibly confident character, and my brother's a very confident person, and I had him tongue like he did not know how to react in that moment. And I was sitting back with my biggest mischievous GM smile, like, ah, I got you. I got you. But eventually he does kind of gain his footing, and he responds. He has his responses. It's very much just I'm gonna rub, you know, dirt and or salt into your wounds. Um, he also makes reference to someone called the Gray-Eyed Girl. Um, he says that, even as powerful as the Gray-Eyed Girl is, she can't even stop him. And then as kind of like the conversation goes on, as they keep looking at Teolia, uh, he begins to disappear, and they start to see a mirror of themselves. And it's a mirror that shows them at their most evil, or it shows them what they fear the most. And all in all, like that encounter to them only felt like a few minutes, but once it was over, they had really like it was close to being morning. Like it lasted the entire night. So before we get into more of that, so something again that I didn't do a good job. So I had this habit of playing all my cards super close to my chest. I wouldn't just come out and say things. I personally now think that like on a lot of things that's a mistake. In some areas, yes, you need to play your cards close to the chest, but on a lot of things like you don't need to. So like point in case, Teolia is this being from another dimension, and I obviously it doesn't make sense in just one session meeting him for the first time that they would know this, but every time he interacts with the party, I don't do a good job of explaining this, but he has not gained his body in this dimension yet. It's taking time for him to become an actual thing, the physical being in this dimension. So that's like why when they initially meet him, he's just eyes and a mouth. There's no body there because there hasn't been enough time for him to process going from one dimension to another and gaining a body. It takes time. It takes time for him to interact with the environment. But one thing, and again, I did not do a good job showing that throughout the entire campaign. And then I didn't do a good job of explaining that because he's this incredibly powerful, like other dimensional being, when he does interact with them on the planet, like it always has some adverse effect on something. So what we'll see in a second, like, is when they finally are let go of him and he leaves. It's basically it's morning time. It starts to rain, and it hadn't rained in this area since the fracture. So it's like 80 to 100 years of zero rain, and it just starts pouring, like monsoon pouring, and that had never happened before. Again, I did not do a good job of showing or telling like that was because of Teolia. And it's because I know it's because I was trying to play my cards close to the chest and I wanted to be this cool reveal and I was like, or I want to be able to reveal this, or I want my players to be able to figure this out and they would feel so smart. But it just ends up when you play it so close to your chest, when you don't give enough clues, like, and that's the thing with being a GM is your clues if your clues don't feel obvious, they're probably not good enough. If your clues feel obvious, then it's not that the players are going to just see this painfully obvious clue, but it's going to be clear enough for them to see, and they're not going to overlook it. We're cursed and blessed, but we're more so cursed with we know everything. So what something may seem painfully obvious to us, so we try and hide it. And then because the players are lacking way more information than us, it doesn't look like anything to them. So if it's painfully obvious to a GM, then it should be good enough for a player to catch on to. And I was not doing that. I was hiding everything and I wanted everything. I just didn't do a good job showing them that. And I honestly I don't think any of my players until right now, if they're listening, would know why anything weird happened right after they met Teolia is because of Teolia trying to it was the process of him trying to gain his body in that dimension. But so yeah, that is something I need to do a way better job on is not hiding everything and just giving out information. But yeah, so Teolia disappears. It starts a big argument in the group because most of the group is like, "Who is that? That was weird. Why did that just happen?" And they're like, "How did you?" They, Parallax. He pulled his sword on Tama because he's like, he said your name. He knows who you are. How do you know him? And Tama Tama is ready to fight whenever, so he had his weapon, which Tama has this big glaive that's chained to his arm. He was ready to fight. He wasn't about to tell anyone his private business. Warden ends up kind of being the mom and talking them through it, and there's this like uneasy peace. But I do believe Tama kind of reveals that uh, Teolia is responsible for the death of his wife in that moment, but he doesn't really go into any other details. So now they know Teolia by name. They know he's very powerful, and then they have this clue about the gray-eyed girl, who's someone they end up needing to find. And then, so like I said, it's pouring, monsoon levels of pouring. It slows down their travel, and then when they finally make it back to where Barsana's supposed to be, it has rained so hard that mudslides had come and washed away Barsana. It's gone. So again, that just points back to, hey, why did I have such a contrived way to get them all together if in the end Barsana's gone? And the reason I wiped out Barsana was again to show, hey, weird things are happening with the weather or the planet when Teolia shows up, which I was just yeah, I didn't do a good job of saying that. I just it was like I put it out there as very two unrelated things when I could have done so much more better at relating them to the group. Orsana's gone, and then they had that little letter that talked about Lancaster, so the session ends with them heading towards Lancaster, which was only a couple of days travel, so it wasn't far for them. Yeah, so that is the first session out of the way. It went a lot smoother than I thought it was going to. Everyone seemed to have a lot of fun. It was funny because in that at that time, this I had introduced two separate friend groups to each other. So people showed up that didn't know each other at all and had to do their voices for their characters and play this role playing game, and they had no idea who the person across the table was. Like half my friend group knew each other and then the other half knew the other half, and so half and half were meeting for the first time. So it was very awkward for some people, actually for all of us, in that sense, because it was you're literally playing right next to a stranger, but everyone did such a good job. um, if anyone did have those like feelings of awkwardness, they didn't let it show or shine through in the game. I think everyone played their character really well. I think in that session, I think kind of like the highlights were like Tama playing his like stoic, you know, I'm working with you, but make no mistake, I don't need you kind of character. And then you had Sloane, which was her bratty, like I remember we talked about it briefly with the whole letter thing. She acted like a very pompous brat trying to get the letter, which was entirely in character for her. And she did a good job with it. And then Warden basically multiple times through the session acting as the mom, getting everyone to be peaceable together. Everyone did such a good job with their character, especially the fact that it was the first time for a lot of us. I'm the one who made most of the mistakes, and this is why I'm doing this is just to break down like, hey, that was dumb. This is what I've learned from it going forward. Like I'm not going to do that anymore, or what I can learn from that, or how I would have done it differently. But yeah, so that is session one. I don't really think I have any other notes in regards to any of that, but sound off in the comments. How bad were my mistakes? In the story, did you hear any other mistakes that I made? Anything I could do better? Tell me some of your mistakes. Let me know. But that's all I got. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one.